Hi, this is Frank with a Frank Opinion. Tonight I wanted to go over how we got to the point that we're almost on the verge, unless we can stop it, of the passage of a Republican tax bill that is the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of our country. And there's been several transfers of wealth over the last 30 years, but this is the biggest, to the wealthiest individuals and families in our society and to corporate America. How did we get here? Very quickly, and I labeled this the 46-year assault on the 99%. And here I kind of put down the four guys that I've labeled the four horsemen of the apocalypse. First one is Lewis F. Powell Jr. He wrote the famous Powell Memorandum, which is a very short but brilliant strategy for the corporate domination and takeover of domestic and foreign policy of the United States. And he laid it out, piece by piece. You have to, corporate America, you got to control the media, newspapers, regulators, your politicians, schools of higher education, on and on and on. But I think the paragraph that hits me the hardest here is the one where he talks about the Supreme Court. And he says, under our constitutional system, especially with an activist-minded Supreme Court, the judiciary may be the most important instrument for social, economic, and political change in favor of corporations. He gets on the Supreme Court, is nominated, gets on the Supreme Court, nominated by Nixon, and all of a sudden, most of the decisions of the Supreme Court, from the time that he went on, 1971, to present day, where the corporations or the defendant or the plaintiff go by way of the corporation. 1976, Buckley versus Vallejo, money is speech. 2010, Citizens United, corporations, you can spend almost anything you want on elections. And 2014, if you're wealthy, you too. The limits are gone, you can spend almost anything that you want on elections. The second horseman, underappreciated, is Newt Gingrich, 1994, key individual in terms of creating the society that we have today. He came up with a brilliant strategy of make citizens hate and distrust government so that the Republicans could take over Congress. He was successful in doing so and became Speaker of the House. Don't underestimate Newt Gingrich. Grover Norquist came up with Americans for Tax Reform. Hate tax. This is an incredible combination here. And then Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton doubled down on deregulation, moved the Democratic Party to the right, diluted its traditional role of being for the working class and for the poor. Bill Clinton. These are the four horsemen of the apocalypse as far as I'm concerned. And then we have the cynical treatment of citizens over the last 40 years. And this is the way this goes, and I hope you can follow it. Here we have a box that represents impoverished Black, Hispanic, and Native American communities. This represents the dollars that these communities need to begin to uplift themselves, go from a state of dependence to independence in terms of education, efforts, infrastructure, job training, etc. But this is the amount of money that they get. And it's given to somebody in the community that can pull votes. So the democratic machine of the particular county or borough or precinct says, we'll give you dollars for a little bit of housing, maybe a multi-service center. You got to give us all the votes. You got to bring those votes home to the Democratic Party. On this side we have, think Guidry, Louisiana, impoverished, etc. I hope I'm still right. I know about that community from about 40 years ago. The religious right, evangelicals in Alabama, Mississippi, etc. They've got their issues, they've got their problems. They're some of the poorest areas in the country. But Republican Party says, we will support your views, your social values. And for your problem, we'll give you these dollars. But you, in order to have our support for your social values, you got to deliver votes to the Republican Party. So, Republicans get the religious right and the evangelicals. Democrats get all the votes in these inner city areas. And who walks to the bank and has a blast? Corporations and the wealthy elite who continue to get, while we're fighting for crumbs here, their donors continue to buy and control them to our demise at this point. The Founding Fathers were brilliant. And they were fathers, there were no mothers, basically white men. We had slavery, women obviously didn't have suffrage. White men were brilliant. And they knew that men tend to be greedy, powerful, and they get into arguments. And they might create factions. So they talked about that it would be almost inevitable for citizens to get involved in parties that may oppose each other. Divide mankind, citizens, into parties and inflame them with mutual animosity and render them much more disposed to vex and oppress each other than to cooperate for their common good. Think our broken Congress for the last umpteen years, including right now, worst of all time. Interesting that they predicted already on the very next page, that's James Madison in Federalist number 10, the tax bill. He said the apportionment of taxes on the various descriptions of property is an act which seems to require the most exact impartiality, yet there is perhaps no legislative act in which greater opportunity and temptation are given to a predominant party to trample on the rules of justice. Every shilling with which they overburden the inferior party is a shilling saved to their own pockets. So, here we have the House of Representatives, which they created, lots of representatives, representing smaller communities, okay? But they knew that these people, who only lasted 2-year terms, lots of them, might on some evenings be drinking a little bit too much or what have you, getting off the rails, and may be developing legislation that would not be for the common good, that would be destructive. Well, then they developed the Senate. 6-year terms, generally older. They had to be in their particulars, they had to be citizens for 9 years, I believe. Only 2 per state. These guys were supposed to be kind of the elder statesmen, wiser, more experienced, and they would set our path straight again. They wouldn't let this, the House of Representatives, ruin the development of a better society, a better country. What happens if the House of Representatives and the Senate both are drinking a little bit too much on that Friday night? Smoking something that has a little something in it? Well, they also then said, it's up to the citizens. You've got to straighten these people out. You've got to get them out of office, get a better person in there for you, representing your interest. But you can't stay on the sidelines. By the way, this is me right here. I had more hair then. In any case, you've got to get involved. And let me tell you what's coming up as an opportunity. The midterms start as early as March 3rd in Texas. So not only do we have to do everything we possibly can to stop the Republican tax bill in its tracks right now, by being in the homes, in front of the homes, in Congress, in large numbers, on a steady basis, not just 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, steady basis until they say uncle and they see what can happen. Because the thing that they fear is not fear itself, they fear something else more, and that is being unseated, not being reelected. And that will begin your journey towards your primary in your state to get the best elected official for yourself. Thanks.